Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of the Chat It Up podcast. If you're new to the podcast, this is a bi-weekly chat about all things Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So when you're done with this episode, jump back and make sure you listen to the first 3 episodes as well. There's some great interviews about some really cool things going on in the UP. This week, my guest is a good friend of mine by the name of John Spigarelli. And I know I sound like a broken record because everybody I talk to is a good friend of mine, but you know what? Sorry, not sorry, okay? my friends are doing some pretty cool stuff. John and I have been friends for a little less than 10 years. He's the former VP of Ecommerce for Getz's Clothiers in downtown Marquette, and currently he's an executive producer for Elegant Seagulls, which is also located in Marquette. Truth be told, this was probably the easiest interview that I've done so far, just because John and I have lunch at least once or twice a month. So this interview is basically exactly how our lunch conversations go. By that I mean it was super laid back, casual, and we touch on a lot of different subjects. So I'm going to just jump right into this so you guys know the drill. Let's chat it up. All right, I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, John Spigarelli. John, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
This feels way too formal. I feel like we should be chatting down at the pasta shop.
This is way too formal. We should be at the pasta shop. I should have a chicken and cheese in front of me, a lightly buttered garlic bread.
Right, I should have a kudagi.
Yep, that's how this should have been done. Instead, we're in my office right now, 5:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's Tuesday, right?
It is
Okay,
Tuesday.
just checking.
It is Tuesday. So let's just jump right into this, John. So you're an Iron Mountain native, class of 95.
Class of 95.
So what was it like growing up in Iron Mountain for you? And I've kind of asked everybody this question because I feel like everybody's version of growing up in the UP is different, and I'm curious to see what your answer is because, I mean, Iron Mountain and Kingsford, a street divides them, and I grew up around the same time as you. So what was it like for you growing up in Iron Mountain?
Knowing what I know now was a ridiculously cool upbringing. You know, I think that when I think back, it's funny we talk about this, and you know, the past few years, you don't think about your childhood a lot, and then all of a sudden I start remembering weird little things about my childhood. But I think one of the big things that hits home for me is family, and the more that I explore the world and the older I get, I realize that most people did not have the upbringing I had. I mean, my mom and dad's family on both sides, fairly large, tons of cousins, and we spent a lot of time with family. I mean, you think like traditional Italian family, like there was Sunday dinner, like that thing went down. Like those are the things that I take away from that experience, and having that, you know, that real connection with family was big. Sure. And just kind of carried through, and it's, you know, my particularly my mom's side of the family. Sure. You know, my mom was 40. My grandmother was 40 when she had my mom, or around that age. Sure. So when I was 10 years old, my grandparents were retired. Right. They're old. Right. You know, I'll never. Some of the memories I have are like my grandfather and my dad were breaking the driveway out at our house to pour a new drive. My mom and dad just had their driveway redone, so this would have been probably 30 years ago. And you know, my grandpa was out there swinging a hammer, you know, gigantic sledgehammer, and he was probably 75, 78 years old. Yeah. You know, so it was just a different like experience and a very broad experience, and a ton of knowledge, and you know, it was just really cool to be able to be in that environment. And you know, thinking that was the 80s and the 90s. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. No. Although it is that long ago. It does feel, but it was just a different experience.
I can relate to that, especially having both sides of your family around. I feel the exact same way. The more I've traveled and I've gotten to know different people in different backgrounds, I realize how rare that is to have that much family around and to constantly be doing things together and getting along very well, you know, so to speak. And I don't want to say that that's unique to the UP, but it's definitely a common theme that I think a lot of people share.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned like big dinners, because it seems like my family gets together around every holiday, whether it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, the big holidays like Christmas or Thanksgiving, whatever. Like, there's an excuse for everybody to get together and break some bread.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're gonna do it.
Yeah.
So
it just, I think back to, you know, even close friends, and the UP has this. I think that the mystique of when I graduated from high school, people are like, I want to get the hell out of here.
Yes, I was one.
Like, it was just like nobody wanted to stay, and I was like, I'll never forget. Like, I didn't really want to go to school. My dad was like, "You got two choices." I was working at Super One Foods, my job, you know, doing my thing, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go to school. My dad's like, "We got two choices. The choice is either going to school or you're going in the Army." And I thought to myself, that answer's pretty easy, because I'm never going to cut in the Army, so I'm definitely going to go to school. So, you know, I ended up applying at Northern and making my way here, but the resurgence of people wanting to live the lifestyle and come back here and raise families and just live have an experience that's a bit different than what everyone else is having throughout the United States. Granted, I don't want to put the UP too far up on a pedestal, because you know, there's other great places in the nation, but at the same time, you see more and more people are coming back, and then people have stayed. You know, I think some of the things back to the growing up piece, like one of my very best friends, Joel Dank, like we've been friends since we were in 7th grade, and like he lives in Nagani. Like, that's crazy to think that, you know, we're 41, 42 years old now, and one of my best friends has been around basically my entire life. Like, that's such a cool, you know, thing to have that experience. And I think that it's easy to take that for granted, that, you know, like, you have these lifelong friends that seem to, you know, that a lot of people have these friends come and go, or it's not as easy to maintain these relationships. Then you have that situation, and it's like, you know, my significant other, Maureen, she laughs because all of a sudden when we get together, we're freshmen in high school.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
It's just a funny thing.
And I think you brought up a really good point about a lot of people being like, I want to get out of here. And then they leave, they settle down, they get married, they have kids, and they start thinking, what would I like my kid's childhood to be?
Sure.
And they start reflecting back on how awesome it was to grow up in these small towns in the UP. Again, not trying to put it too high on a pedestal, but that experience, and maybe it's the nostalgia factor that kind of puts the rose-colored glasses on it, but I feel like that is the main thing that drives people back this way, is wanting that same experience for their kids.
Yeah, and there's I think people take for granted or don't recognize there's a tremendous opportunity for people 20 to 50 years old to come back and put their fingerprints on these communities in the UP. These communities need people. They need the leadership, the ideas, the thoughts, the energy, and being able to come back. Like, think about trying to, you know, we're 40 Below members before I timed out thanks to age. But like, think about the impact of what 40 Below has done on the community in Marquette County.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying you can't do that in the groups in the Chicagoland area or Minneapolis or Omaha or wherever. But the difference between the 120 people that were actively in 40 Below, and we were there, and the impact that happened, versus the, say, 2,000 or 3,000 that may be in the Chicago chapter. Like, it's a big difference of being able to say, okay, I was able to volunteer some time, put some effort in, create better for everyone. Like, I think there's a really unique piece of that. It's a tangible portion, and the communities are welcoming, and I think that it's starting to open a little bit more and more all the time. Like, I think that that's good, and there's huge I just think we think home, right? You think about what's going on in Iron Mountain and Kingsford, and I got a lot of love for that area. I don't live there. I don't think I've created a life for myself here that I've become really comfortable with. And that I probably wouldn't be able to move back or move away. Like, I don't want to go anywhere. Like, I love living here. But when I look at what's happening, I have a tremendous amount of pride for all the good things that are happening in the Iron Mountain and Kingsford area. All the industry. There's a tremendous need for jobs, but there's a tremendous need for people to come back to the area, and that talent attraction. You know,
absolutely.
Close friends that have businesses and have different operations in the area. You know, I hear the same thing. Like, we need talent. We want people. Like, that's such an important piece, and it's a great community. It is. Just as a, I always think, like, the UP as a whole is a community. It just is, whether you like it or not. Like, Houghton, they're our neighbor. Escanaba, neighbors. Munising, neighbors. But when I think like Ishpeming, Negaunee, Marquette, Gwyn, like that metropolitan area is like Iron Mountain, Kingsford, Norway.
Sure.
Like, and it's like that. Yeah, there's some dividing lines geographically from the city standpoint or from the school standpoint, and the rivalries with stopping the Iron Mountain Kingsford football game. Can we stop for a second and talk about that nonsense? I mean, there's just some things that got to be sacred. And sitting in this room with a flivver and being a mountaineer, and believe me, the athletic genes in my family went directly to my sister and not to this guy. So you wouldn't see me doing anything.
I feel like
that
I could
decent.
have a whole separate episode just talking about that, but
there's just some things that are sacred, and I think Ishmael and Negaunee, or maybe Negaunee and Marquette are finding the same issue. It is what it is, but I just think it's comical, but at the same time, kind of sad.
It's very sad, and obviously things change. I don't know. My opinion on that, I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers.
No. It's it's hard. It's hard, and everybody has. It's like everything else. There's purpose behind it. There's reason. There are ramifications that run a little bit deeper than what the majority of people think oftentimes, but it is what it is. It's just the way time changes.
So you said you basically found your way up to Northern. What did you end up going to school for at Northern?
I thought it would be a really great idea to be a secondary ed history teacher until I realized that I'm horrible at math and I probably can't pass any of the math classes that are involved with the educational program. In fact, I'd venture a guess to say if my dad didn't work on Ron Tass's Blazer in high school, I'd be a 42-year-old high school senior still trying to figure out.
Shout out to Ron Tass.
Trying to get out.
What a name drop.
Yep, that's how it is. I probably would still be in high school. But no, legitimately, I had a great advisor, thought being a history teacher would have been a great idea, and an advisor sat down with me. I was a sophomore, and he's like, how do you like being unemployed? And I'm like, I wouldn't like that very much. And he's like, well, you're going to be. This career path is in a tough spot. And this was late 90s, and there was obviously things still are in flux with public education and private education. Yeah. But, it was the point where I was struggling through these math classes, and, he kind of leveled me. He's like, you probably want to do something else. In the most gentle way you could deliver that message. So I walked up to the degree audits, and a girl was working at the desk who was in a handful of my liberal studies classes, and I walked in and I was like, I got to change my major now. Got to figure out what's going on. I really don't know what's going on. I wasn't the best student in the world. I was not a motivated student.
Sure.
And I was like, the only thing I know, and talking to this girl, is like, the only thing I know is I don't want anything with math. And she's like, what do you think about public relations? I'm like, I don't know. It sounds good to me. There's any math? She's like, nope.
Sure.
It sounds great. And I got in the first class and I fell in love with it.
Oh, okay.
Like I fell in love with the process, the communication, the collaboration, the working with people, the messaging, like all of that. And it spun me into this marketing minor piece. And then all of a sudden, in a surprising turn of events, if you're interested in something, you actually pay attention to it and you do halfway decent?
Yeah.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, that's funny how that works.
Yeah, it's amazing. So school all of a sudden became more palatable to me, but at the same time, part of me not being a serious student made NMU tell me that I needed to shape up a little bit. Yeah. So, and part of that made my mom and dad start thinking that I should shape up a little bit, because I never worked. I would go home on the weekends and work.
Sure.
But I never had a job, so on the job hunt, I ended up finding a job working the sales floor at Getz's, kind of the same time that I transitioned into that PR program.
Okay.
And that, being able to look back in time now, like that whole, so much happened. That was like the summer of '97. So many decisions that were made during that short window of time set the tone for 10 or 15 years, which is really weird to think.
Right.
But it was pretty significant.
It's funny how things work that way, because, I mean, you basically started working there on the sales floor in college, and that transition basically into a full-time job, was it basically like as you graduated, you had a full-time job?
Yeah,
or how did
it was
that
really,
play out?
The guys, Rock and Dick, the guys who own Getz's, just great people, just great people in general. Like, just put aside business acumen and all the success they've had there. I mean, just two guys that, you're happy you know them because they're just cool people.
Absolutely.
But I started looking for jobs, and Dennis Menge, who recently retired actually, was the actual store manager, and he's like, "What are you looking for jobs for?" And I'm like, "Because I'm gonna graduate." And he's like, what about staying here? And I was like, never really thought about that. Didn't know it was an opportunity. He's like, yeah. He's like, we should talk about this. So we sat down and talked about, some of the things that were happening in the late 90s. I mean, the internet started to have this traction.
Absolutely.
Educational facilities using it a little bit more and more. And you have this situation where there's this opportunity. And Dennis and Rock and Richard had a tremendous vision for the future of what was possible. And they actually had a website, and they were selling things online in 1997
That's
and 1998.
Incredible.
I mean, think about the vision
that's
of
incredible.
that. There was a handful of community members, including Dave Riome from NMU, that helped facilitate some of the actual technology behind the sales of things. But they were so far ahead of their time. And kind of the gist was, you got a year to figure out if this is going to work, see what happens.
Yeah.
And a year turned into 2 years and turned into a couple of staff members. And I'll never forget, so Keith Dixon, who is the current operations VP, I'm not sure what his title is currently at Getz is.
Okay.
He and I were working on the sales floor at the same time, and we went back and forth about, can he come help in the internet? And things were getting more, it was busy enough where one person couldn't handle the work on a daily basis, whether it was customer care emails or adding things to the, to the shopping cart online, or transacting the orders. I'll never forget, so old school. You think about, I almost feel like, it almost feels illegal to say this now, but orders would come in via email. And there was this tool called PGP. PGP might still be around, but it was like an encryption key.
Okay.
So orders would come in encrypted, and we'd run the key with the password, and it would decrypt the email. And in the email was the order, so the person's address, their credit card number, their phone number, and what they ordered. So we would go pick those items off the sales floor and then hand key that credit card number into one of those old school separated keypads.
Yes.
And then a carbon copy credit card receipt would print, one sheet white, one sheet yellow, and we'd sign it phone order.
Yep.
And then we just put it in the box and shipped it. It was so old school. Just the comical things, especially in the beginning. There was a long span of time with that organization, but the first few years looking back at it, was how do you explain to somebody from New Jersey that somebody from Negaunee walked in this morning and bought a pair of bib overalls they ordered last night,
right?
But you didn't have the chance to go pick it before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just a really cool experience. And then there was an explosion. In 2002, when Google AdWords started to take effect, there were a handful of different paid search tools that were out there. But when AdWords started to really gain some prevalence, and as demand started to grow online, and it was really the Wild West. No one was organized.
Yeah.
Amazon was still selling books.
Right.
There was, it was just a different scenario. So that growth of that organization happened. It happened slowly and quickly at the same time, because you start going through these major jumps of how many pieces of inventory do we think we need? Well, we know we bought 12 of those last year, and we have one left. So we probably need to order another 12 this year to actually, getting to the point where we had automated reports that were doing forecasting for us and things like that. So it was really there are so many. We could talk for 10 hours on all the steps of everything that happened from 2000 to 2012 at Getz. It was a pretty incredible experience. Ended up being one of the largest Carhartt retailers in the nation. Was the largest under one roof. You think a Tractor Supply, right, and some of those other organizations, they have 300, 400, 500 different doors throughout the United States. So there's a lot of merchandise flowing in and out of there. But what was going on at Getz is, that you couldn't replicate that today. And that was a combination of right place, right time, good talent. Rock and Dick, super brilliant business guys.
Yeah.
Had the mindset, the ability, the cash to be able to make it happen. There was a lot of good stuff that happened there. Just weird things I'll never forget, sitting down, it was the fall of, it was probably around Thanksgiving of 2010. And remember back in the day when the North Face Denali jacket was the rage?
Yes.
The fleece jacket that was 100% useless. It was basically wearing a bed sheet outside. Didn't keep you warm. The wind blew right through it, but it was this style status symbol.
Yeah.
And for men, women, and kids, I'll never forget. We had people from the North Shore of Chicago calling because we had this inventory and everybody wanted these jackets, and these people were buying a dozen at a time, 8 of them at a time. My daughter wants the Pink Perfection one. There was just a whole thinking back to what that craze was. kind of, you know, falling into the same craze of the UGG boots and the, you know, the yoga pants and that whole, like, being on the opposite end of the spectrum, because what most people don't know is I actually was a buyer for them too. So on top of doing all the web stuff, like me and Dennis and Brock, and we would go to trade shows and do all the buying. So we would be selecting products to show up on the sales floor a year in advance.
Yeah.
So here I am, like 30 years old, picking out women's jackets and I'm not talking like picking out a couple of them. I mean, we're ordering hundreds of them at a time.
Sure.
You know, it's like, then I'm probably thinking to myself, there's Dennis and Rock looking at this guy, you know, this young kid, and like, we want to spend what on what? Like it just the level of respect and trust that those guys put into the team that they built. Like, it was just a really cool. Learned so much business wise from them, and just so much about how to treat people well. Like, I think that there was they had the opportunity to run the business many different ways, and they were so open and so warm. They wanted you to bust your ass. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, you had to work. Yeah. Like, there was no such thing as a weekend down there. Like, weekends were for the weak. Like, that's a true story. Like, but they never expected you to do anything they weren't going to do, because when you showed up on a Saturday, Dick was already there. When you left on a Sunday afternoon, Rock was locking the door. Like, it was just that type of scenario. So you automatically respect that work ethic, and it just, you know, is a piece of part of that business that I don't know if going back, I would do it again. I mean, like everything else, I'm sure you're the same thing. Like, there's 1,000 things I wish I would have done in my 20s instead of work 85 hours a week. But at the same time, though, I had an opportunity there to do something that very few people had the opportunity to do. Just a really neat, like, scenario. And I'll be the first person to say that I am no genius. I'm probably right place, right time was such a big piece of that, and the ability to learn and adapt. I think nothing prepares you for you know what that ended up being.
Yeah, I mean, I think the moral of that whole story, but not just your story, but Getz's story, is kind of right place at the right time. I mean, you're talking about, like, a couple of things that you mentioned, like Amazon is still selling books. Like, what was it? Past dial-up, or when you got there, were you still
I was full on dialing in.
Okay.
Like, I was full on dialing in.
It's like, okay, we're from kind of the era of, like, watching this rise of the internet. So you go from working the floor to graduating and getting a job straight out of college for them, to seeing this dial-up internet system all the way through to, like you said, to 2012, where you're one of the largest Carhartt retailers in the world, and you're crushing it with Uggs and Stormy Kromer, and the list goes on and on of these companies that you're crushing it with. And the best part about it is, this isn't a story from Silicon Valley or anything like that. It's from Marquette, Michigan, and it's, like you said, a couple of guys that were business smart, had the foresight to head down this path, and also give a young kid a chance to do something, and also retain some talent here in Marquette. Because the number one thing, if you talk to anybody from Northern, they're talking about is, how do we retain and keep our talent here in not only the UP but Marquette as well. Yeah,
I think that's when I look back at the experience of working at Getz, is probably the thing that I take away the most, and that I have the most amount of pride in, is creating full-time jobs that people can live on. Not BS full-time jobs, but real full-time jobs that people can buy homes and cars and take vacations, and working very hard, but creating. I think that was a piece that I've never owned my own business, and sometimes I wonder if I should own my own business someday. And, you know, I think everybody goes through that process, but at the same time, like that, there's such a good feeling about knowing that it went from one full-time job to all of a sudden there were like 20 full-time jobs. Yeah. I mean, the internet side of that business, and the store business is super strong down there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's 20 some employees plus on the. I don't know what it is today, but 5 years ago when I left, there was 50 employees in that place, and 30 plus were full-time. You think about what the effect on this community was. You know, like, back to Silicon Valley builds, you know, empires on backs of people from, you know, Berkeley and from Harvard and you know, Wharton Business School, and it's like Getz has built a dynasty on kids from Calumet who didn't care that they were working 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because they had a work ethic.
Yeah, that
work
ethic.
That was the thing I think I've taken away the most, like, also when it comes to, being a reference for people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so many times where people will call us like this, like, check-in reference, and half the battle for these people is they're from the UP.
Right.
Like, I think that there's people from the people, you look at, like, if you draw that 500-mile radius circle around the UP, and it's like, people know what they're getting. Like, there's people from the Chicagoland area, from Detroit, from Minneapolis. Like, if a Uper walks in their door and they're qualified and they got skills, like, nobody's going to outwork that person.
No.
I think that there's there's a badge of honor, but there's also a tremendous level of, like, pressure to uphold that. Like,
sure.
Nobody's going to be that slacker Uper out there giving everybody a bad name. Like,
right.
That's, so it's like, it's really interesting to see that, though. But I think that, the point of pride on that is, I mean, you don't grow up in this area and not see work ethic.
Absolutely.
Like, it doesn't make a difference if, I looked at my dad, my uncles worked their butts off for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And loyal customers coming to him all the time. And you look at the guys working in the mines and guys in the timber industry, but then also you think about every dock that's working their 18th hour this week or this day, today, getting the job done and helping people. And it's like, there's a part of that just is ingrained in being here. It's like, if it's going to take what it's going to take, but we're going to get a job done here and do it right.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I kind of want to circle back to a point that you were making about with Getz, is where with the job creation and, not only did you have this interesting perspective of, you not only helped create a bunch of jobs, but you also played a role in kind of creating a vibrant community outside of work for people as well. I mean, you were one of the founding members of 40 Below. For people listening in that don't know, 40 Below is a young professionals organization in Marquette. And as I just alluded to, John was one of the founding members of that. And there's well over 100 members of that group now. It's probably getting closer to 200. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been on the board of 40 Below before. It's one of those things where you have the interesting perspective of you've seen that side of it grow, the social side for young professionals in this area as well. Yeah. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Well, I think that when the Lake Superior Community Partnership, Lindsay Hemela and Dana Karanen came together, Dana Watson,
sure,
and kind of spearheaded the idea of putting this group together. And I got an invite. I'm like, what's this? I'm like, should I do this?
Yeah.
And I was in a spot too where I was becoming hungry to be more involved in the community just as a whole.
Absolutely.
Like, I'd been here for a while and wanted to start being able to help out and volunteer and provide resources and just thought leadership, things like that. And they had a handful of, like, lunch events. And this actually ties into where we're sitting today, because it was one of the first times that I met Ben Johnson, who owns Elegant Seagulls.
Great.
So we sat down, had a few discussions, and ended up realizing that there were a significant amount of people under 40 in this community that didn't talk to each other. Mm-hmm. You think, like, after work, unless, like, I used to be a fairly avid golfer until I got frustrated because my game's horrible, so I decided not to do that anymore. But outside of a handful of things from outside of the workplace, like, everybody just went to work. People went to work at Bast, people went to work at the hospital, people went to work at Getz's and the mine and what have you. But we never had a great opportunity to meet people around our same age or in a space where many are being brought in at the same time. And I think it was really eye-opening, because for a while, I felt like you almost feel alone, because there was I think that you think about under 40 in a small community, you don't think that there's a vast amount of people living here. But when you see how many there are, and it's like, it was a really eye-opening experience to get people together. Sure. And get people, and I mean, lasting lifelong friendships based out of that organization, and people I stay in touch with on a weekly basis from it.
Yeah.
And it's cool to be able to not just see it from the beginning, but see how much better it is every year and the improvement of it. And I don't want to make this sound like this is a sales fest
Right.
for 40 Below, but at the same time, I think for other EP communities, Escanaba had one. I think they still have one. I know Keweenaw has one. I think there's a level of importance of being able to bring people together just to meet. Yeah. And nothing else. No pressure above and beyond. Nobody's got to go and bag groceries on a Saturday afternoon at Econo Foods. Right. It's just more of a, hey, let's get people together, make sure everyone's aware of everyone here.
Absolutely.
I think it's a really cool thing. Just so much value came out of it.
Yeah, and I see the main value of it is, and I talked with Gina a little bit about this in my last podcast, where people not from this area, it's hard making friends because everybody, as you mentioned, like your friend you've had since you were a kid.
Yeah.
All of many of the social circles around here are people that have known each other their entire lives. And it's hard.
That's a good point.
It's hard to enter that social circle and meet some people. I was one of those people. I mean, yes, I was born in Kingsford and born and raised there. When I moved up here after I finished school, there were a couple of people that I knew that hadn't finished their degree yet at Northern, but it was like they were graduating and moving on, and I didn't really know a whole lot of people up here.
Yeah.
And so I ended up kind of using 40 Below for that purpose that it was intended for, to like, hey, where's some other people out here like me?
Absolutely.
That maybe aren't already tied into these super tight social circles. I mean, really that's kind of where you and I met or gained a friendship, so to speak. I mean, you're 10 years older than I am. So I mean, growing up, yes, we grew up in the same town, but obviously being 10 years apart.
Pretty disconnected.
Yeah, definitely disconnected. Yeah. So, like you said, friendships that, have grown out of that is just immense, and it's a great way to combine the work life with the social life and kind of well-rounding it and making it a better place to live and work.
I mean, that's a strong community. I think that part of the with Elegant Seagulls, the organization I'm with now, like one of the things that we have to be very mindful of is attraction of talent is not easy. At the same time, people want to live here.
Sure.
When you're recruiting people for a skill set that is semi-unique, and they have a handful of people, all of a sudden you turn around, it's like somebody's got a family, significant other. So you're bringing people into this community if you get them to move here, and it's like, okay, we hire employee A. Employee A's got a husband who needs a job somewhere. Yep. Their kids need to go to school somewhere. That's a whole different, but a portion of that community building, 40 Below, and all those other pieces all help create a more welcoming community for people to move into.
Sure. So, you've kind of mentioned Elegant Seagulls a couple of times here. Now, you've been with them since around 2013, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. April 1st, 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of transitioned from the Getz's world over to Elegant Seagulls. Do you want to, I guess there's probably some people out there, I don't want to be ignorant. Do you want to explain what Elegant Seagulls is? Because not everybody knows what you guys are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of a weird, people don't realize what's happening here.
Sure.
Let's throw it back to just before leaving Getz's. I was burned out.
Okay.
I was like, what more can I do? Where are we going? Do I want to do this further? I mean, talk about rarity. I had one job for 15 years. Today that's unheard of, one job for 15 years. And I was like, is this what I really want to do for the rest of my life? And I actually hired Elegant Seagulls. So Elegant Seagulls is a creative design agency. So we do lots of web stuff. So we'll do websites, strategy behind websites. We'll do application design, user interface stuff. We're doing. That's essentially how this business was formed. I mean, we're more on the creative side than the technical side.
Sure.
So when people ask you build web apps? No, we design them. We don't build them. There's a handful of things that we do, but you wouldn't think this was happening in a little building across from the post office in Marquette.
Absolutely not.
And that was but I had hired Ben to do some branding work for me before I left Getz's, and that's I met him through 40 Below, brought him on board. We were thinking about doing we were thinking about spinning off some different online stores to be more focused. Like there'd be a women's store, there'd be a men's store, there'd be a store that was just like Heritage American, Filson, Woolrich, that type of thing. We started thinking about that, but there was uncertainty with inventory, and there's a whole different myriad of reasons why that got tabled. And when that got tabled, that burned me out. That was like this final straw. I'm like, so we're going to sit here and continue to try to be a mall in one website, and that's not going to work, because you see a little bit into the future of how things get compartmentalized and segmented. It's just a different experience. Like people don't want to go and look at your grandma's blouse when they're trying to buy a pair of work boots. You know what I mean? Like it's just a different type of scenario. So I reached out to Ben after the project was over. I'm like, hey, I said I don't want to be too forward, but I absolutely fell in love with the way you guys work. Like from a collaboration standpoint, the creativity from their team standpoint. If there's ever an opportunity to come work at Elegant Seagulls, let me know. I'll be over the moon to apply. And Ben was like, I actually think I have an opportunity right now if you're interested. And they had a project manager that had left them for a different opportunity who's brilliant. Like I can't imagine that person trying to replace that person. And when she left, I think Ben was able to come back and say, okay, this is how I want to take this team forward.
Sure.
It was kind of right place, right time. So we talked for maybe a month or so, and then just put it together. And then I left Getz's on a Friday, and I was officially unemployed for 2 days.
Oh Lord!
And then Monday,
you are a true workaholic.
On Monday, April 1st, I rolled this chair in this office and started, and I was just blown away by how unprepared I was to change jobs.
But going back to kind of our theme that keeps coming back here, right place, right time.
Yep.
A connection.
Yep.
Through networking, and I mean, what started as what in my opinion, I guess in my vernacular, even if it's maybe not the correct term, when you kind of started with them, I would consider you guys like a boutique agency. Not agency, that's not even the right word.
That's not unfair though. That's a pretty close.
And now, I mean, you guys have just, in my opinion, boomed. I mean, you're working with some major players. I mean, you've done stuff for ESPN, you've done stuff for CNN. Stormy Cromer, again, we'll give those guys a shout out as much as we can. I mean, you've done stuff for them. I mean, I'll let you kind of talk a little bit more about some of the bigger names that you've been working with, but it's just unbelievable the stuff that you're doing.
Well, I think it's a good lesson too it's a good lesson for us to remember as well internally when you're in the mix of working with all these large organizations from Marquette, which I think is the coolest part of everything.
Absolutely.
It's what got us here, and what got us here is some of the stuff we already talked about. It was talent, hard work, being honest, just doing the right thing. Like a lot of this business is very referral based.
Sure.
And Ben started the business in 2006. It was him. And then he slowly grew, added an employee, and just work ethic, talent, just the way he treats clients, like that whole thing is a great building block for where we're going and the things we're doing. But I mean, cool opportunities. The thing that it's interesting, this business is we're doing less and less local business because the team is more and more saturated by these large projects that are more like national, international.
Yeah.
I miss some of the local business pieces. It's we don't get to sit face to face with a lot of people anymore.
Yeah.
But the demand for what the team is putting out from a creativity side, but also from how we work with organizations, like just weird. Like one day I was sitting here and the phone rang and it said ESPN on it. I'm like, what's ESPN?
You're thinking it's a scam?
No, I was thinking it was the radio station.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, what? So I answered it, and there was a creative director from ESPN, and he said to me, how would you be interested in working for ESPN? And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, so I hang up the phone and I run into Ben's office. I'm like, you'll never believe it. And then the guy emailed. And the long story short, ESPN brought us in to do some work on a redesign they were doing. This was actually a long time ago now. You think about this, was 2014-ish. Mm-hmm. But we ended up being responsible for redesigning the team pages for portions of the team pages for MLB, NFL, NBA, and NHL. So it was really neat. Like, how do you show starting lineups? How do you show stats? Like, it was like a fantasy.
Like my dream
it was
job.
like a fantasy football player's dream. Like, but it also was one of the very first eye-opening projects where, when you're dealing with a multinational billion-dollar company, how difficult it is to work sometimes in those spaces. And it's not. It was more about getting buy-in and approvals and stakeholder being aware, and there's that piece of, there was a lot of actual like relationship building and PR involved in that process, but that working through that, which spiraled into another project for them when we started working on the international syndication side of things, where it's like ESPN sells the rights to the World Series of Poker to a TV channel in France.
Okay.
This was the arm of ESPN that did that, so we were able to do a handful of things involved with that. But just kind of where things are, taking that progress of learning from those larger projects and working further and further, and then having these long-term relationships with people like the Canadian toy manufacturer. They've had a handful of products over the past that have been really successful, but this past Christmas they had the fingerling monkey.
Yes,
and
my
it was
niece was all about him.
Everywhere, on the Today Show, on the front page of Yahoo, like you name it, it was all over the place. And like we've been working for them for many years doing all things web. Like we designed I would say we designed 5 to 6 different web properties for them, including Fingerling's brother, the untamed dinosaurs, and T-Rex and raptors. They're coming out soon. Don't worry, your kids will be looking for them at Christmas time.
Okay, I'll put it down.
But that's been just a really cool like ongoing relationship that we've been able to build. And Andrew, who's my contact, we talk every day. Like, it's just a really neat back and forth, and we actually almost act like an internal team for him. Yeah. It's just really cool to be able to build those relationships and have those pieces in place. Like, it's just a joy to be able to work with people hand in hand and have that trust, because it's like we'll have open conversations. They're not dictating what we're doing. Yeah. Like, they're saying, "What are we doing?" And we'll sit down and talk about it, and then we'll spitball some stuff and whiteboard some things. And I spend a tremendous amount of time on video conferences with people. Like, there was one moment in my career, and it was during the international syndication project for ESPN, that it hit me. I was on a conference call. It was like 7 a.m. here in Marquette, and there were a handful of stakeholders in Hong Kong, a handful of stakeholders in Bristol, and a couple of people in London's office. And I'm thinking to myself, here's a kid who got a PR degree that he's not really using, from NMU, from Iron Mountain, sitting at a desk in Marquette, talking to stakeholders, VP level stakeholders and above from ESPN about a project how would that ever, you know what I mean? How did I get here? It was that moment. It was like, how did I get here? How did we get here? Like, it was very much a eye-opening moment. It's like, we're doing some really cool stuff.
Do you ever, or have you had throughout your career, have you had the imposter syndrome feeling? Are you aware of it?
Every day.
Where you're like, you feel like someone's going to figure you out, like you shouldn't be.
Every day.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think it's also part of, and this is a lesson I learned from family and other coworkers. Like, there's a huge part of staying humble that is so necessary. Mm-hmm. I think it's very easy with the way the world is today to allow ego. Sure. And the madness that comes with ego to take over things, and that's where you see organizations just crumble. Right. Because people lose their minds. Yeah. And it's like, no, we're humble dudes working. This is what it is. Like. Yeah. And obviously, we paint a very pretty picture. Not everything is sunshine and rainbows. So there's difficulties to any job. At work, you mean?
Yeah.
No,
I never.
You got to be kidding me. You telling me that work's a pain in the butt sometimes?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
it is.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
So, besides, obviously you touched a little bit about the bigger projects that you take on. Mm-hmm. You lose a little bit, or you lack then in kind of meeting those people face to face, doing some more local projects. Mm-hmm. What other sort of difficulties do you see? I know you have some people that work remotely. I'm guessing there's probably
about half the team is remote now. Okay. A handful of people that were in the office decided to move to be closer to family. Sure. And a handful of higher, more senior level people that you run in the same situation we talked before. Husband or wife, located X, got kids in school. Being able to make a move is not super easy for them. but managing and working closely with a remote team takes a lot of effort and organization, because everybody's innately good, but communication is pretty easy when you're all in the same room or the same building, and you run up the stairs and see somebody. But when the person you're trying to get the point across to is in Nashville, or he's trying to explain something to you, and you're trying to do it with some chat tools, or if you're trying to do it over a video conference tool, like you have to take a step back and take a deep breath and say, okay, this is not as simple as let's grab some Expo whiteboard markers and figure this problem out on the board. It's more of how do we talk through these things, how do we communicate properly, and how do we teach everyone on the team to know when to use the right tools. Like Slack is an app that we use a lot of tech agencies use it. It's ICQ for all the old school listeners out there. Google Talk.
If you just heard me making that noise and you know what that noise is, if it's bringing flashbacks, and you're an OG internet user.
I think I had an ICQ number that was in the 6 digits. That's how old school I was. But knowing when to use the right tools is half the battle. Because I'm a little bit old school, sometimes it's like pick up the phone.
Yes.
And in this case, pick up the video chat like that.
Right.
The collaboration that happens with that is incredible. But that's a big challenge for us as a whole, and as we think about growth. As we bring additional people on board, ideally we'd love to have people in the Marquette office. But the reality is probably for every 1 or 2 people we would hire that would live in Marquette, there's 10 to 15 different people that we could hire remote.
Sure.
So just trying to figure out what that right balance is. There's opportunities and threats in that, because we can find high quality talent from anywhere and let them work. The downfall is just working with them. Part of the issue for us is air travel. I had never really realized, through most of what happened when I was with Getz's business travel wise was all done via vehicle. We'd go to Chicago, we'd go to Madison. I flew to Salt Lake City one time, but it was pretty minimal. When you start thinking about getting people in and out, going on site, we spent a lot of time on site with clients. That's the one thing that was a big surprise to me is I wasn't opposed to air travel, but I wasn't a big fan of flying.
Right. And
I fall in love with flying. I love flying.
If it's to Vegas, you love
I love flying anywhere.
Oh, okay.
So I'll tell you, don't get me wrong, I love flying to Vegas. But I really like flying anywhere. We're fortunate, I avoid O'Hare if I can, but Detroit's airport's beautiful. Minneapolis' airport's beautiful.
It is.
But there's something that's peaceful and calming in the madness of what's air travel that just allows you to kind of just focus on most of the time I never even buy Wi-Fi.
Sure.
I may every once in a while, but it's just kind of nice. The phone's not ringing. You can kind of just chill out for a little while, read a little bit, or just relax. There's just something that's really unique about that. But getting people in and out of here is difficult, particularly in the winter time.
Of course,
So it's just the county, just in general, I think the UP's been doing a better job. I don't care if I got to drive to Iron Mountain.
No.
I don't care if I got to drive to Escanaba. I'm not driving to Houghton.
Yeah.
No thanks.
No,
And that's no offense to Houghton, but especially in the wintertime, that just sounds like a bad idea.
Well, the snow is.
But it's just trying to get
next level.
We hired our latest hire. This might blow people's minds, but our latest hire, Brian, he's a senior back-end developer, and he lives in Missouri. And we hired him in January, and I've never met him.
Wow.
I've never been able to shake the guy's hand. We tried to fly him here, and he got stuck because there was a bad, snowstorm in Chicago. Missed a connector, couldn't get on the next day's flight. So it's just so we're going to finally meet face to face in September, which I'm really excited about. And he's a super cool guy. But those are the things I think we start thinking about some threats and just challenges. If we worked on a handful of projects for an organization based out of Philly. They have a big office in Chicago. The company's called InvestNet, and they power a lot of the applications and data behind the financial industry. So, some of the major banks, their trust departments use parts of their software.
Okay.
And Edward Jones reps use some of their platform to manage clients and things like that. But we were going to do some user testing of a product we were working on for them that we were designing and kind of whiteboarding and wireframing, and
sure.
They hired a firm in New York, in Manhattan, to do the user testing. Well, we want you on site, and I'm like, when's that going to happen? Next Tuesday. So here the first thing that comes to mind is how am I going to get a flight in January to New York
Yes.
next Tuesday. I mean, surprisingly, it was pretty easy to get a flight, which is really great. Oftentimes, it's not the case. The planes are full and what have you. But there's a need for us to be able to react quickly to some things.
Sure.
So like that's just an interesting. I would not have had that observation 5 years ago.
No, or imagine even trying to have that thought 10 years ago. I mean,
the first time I flew out of Marquette, I flew on a prop plane to Minneapolis, and I was deaf by the time we got there because it was just so loud. Like but it's interesting though, and now it's so convenient. I mean, and I will pick. I love the idea of convenience. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, if you're flying someplace and you're going to save $600 a person, I'm all about you want to drive to O'Hare or drive to Detroit, but I don't. The last thing in the world I want to do is drive home from Green Bay in the wintertime or Appleton or Milwaukee in a snowstorm when I can. Sometimes it's bad enough driving 35 minutes from Sawyer to get home.
So I guess my next kind of question for you is, where do you see? Oh, look at that! I just got a text from Gary V. The Gary V.
No.
I think it's like a scam one. That's when it popped up. It's like
that's
Gary
hilarious.
V. Yeah. No. So, where do you see kind of e-commerce heading, or I don't know if e-commerce is even the right word because that's kind of its own separate animal,
sure.
Just kind of like that digital market space. I mean, it's come so far from the dial-up days all the way to, Obama visited here to shout out our WiMAX, the Wi-Fi that Northern has, and now we're, that was 2011, and here we are in 2018 and beyond. Where do you see things heading?
Well, I've got a handful of different ideas. Let's talk commerce real quick because it's a piece that's pretty near and dear to my heart, and it allowed us to. We were super fortunate. The team of Stormy Cromer, Bob and Gina, gave us a shot to redo everything for them, and seriously, it was probably the coolest project I've ever worked on. Part of it was just working hand in hand with them and the mystique of Stormy. Like, there's just something about.
There is a mystique.
There's just something about that. But I mean, just in the ongoing relationship we have with them, but like seeing that experience of working through that process with them and seeing where they were. And then where they are today and all the things that are going to happen in the future and the potential. And Gina sees it. I mean, she's brilliant. When we think about where she's at and what she's doing and where she's taking that company, and like, I don't know if I've ever been as proud to say that we've been able to partner with somebody like we partner with Stormy.
Right.
Like, it's just such a cool, like, and I think in saying that, people that aren't from the UP or from Northeastern Wisconsin probably wouldn't understand that. But at the same time, it's just, when you start talking about like highlights of a career, like, that's like one of the top three. Like, it's just super cool.
I could definitely see that. I'm super pumped. I've never been to the factory before.
You'll freak out.
We're going on Saturday.
Are you?
And not only are we going on Saturday, but Gina's giving us private tour.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. I'm like a little kid pumped.
You'll be shocked at the size of Stormy and Jack Warts combined, and what they're doing. And when you talk about creating jobs, like, you talk about doing something so different and so special, and it's not an easy business. Having been in that business from the other side of the equation and realizing what vendors have to do to keep retailers happy, and then what current retailers are doing to vendors from a margin squeeze standpoint, like, that is not a fun business to be in, and they do it well. And I think a huge part of it is just the company culture and what gets extended from Bob's hand, from Gina's hand, from the team there. Andrea and the rest, everybody that's there, just exudes this UP feeling. Like, I would love to be able to go to one of the trade shows they're at and be able to watch as like a totally like hidden observer all the interactions they have on a daily basis with different retailers. And I mean, the thing is just super cool because it's just so different. And in my opinion, they're poised to do huge things, because they have what everyone is trying to amalgamate, like, in a full way.
Authenticity.
They got it in spades. Like, you don't make that story up. And I'm not talking about the story of George and Ida.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Bob and Gina and the family. Like,
I'm really looking forward to chatting with her.
It's super cool.
I don't want to spoil
it's super cool.
upcoming episodes, but let's just say I'm really excited to chat with Jeannie.
That's awesome. Anyway, that was a little bit of a diversion, but
you and I get sidetracked? Never.
Never. Well, that's what they make executive lunches for.
Executive. I wish I was an executive.
I wish I was an executive too. I don't control my own calendar. The clients control my calendar, and that's okay. I'm okay with that.
So,
but yeah, I mean, well, I think there's a handful of things that are. Mobile is a gigantic. The idea that whether we like it or not, people have access to everything basically all the time.
Yes.
Unless you're in a handful of spots in the UP. On Friday night, I was in the spot in the UP and didn't have cell phone service, and a client called me.
Wow.
And when I told her that, I think they were a little bit stunned. I was like, I didn't have service. No, it was just kind of Ishpeming way, but it was just no service. Like the call didn't ring through.
Must be all the iron in the hills.
Something out there. But I think that just the expansion of LTE service and then the potential of 5G service coming in.
Yes.
The web is changing, and experiences are getting. It's like everything else. We can tie this back to like service levels with Amazon versus a small mom and pop.
Sure.
People are mad when things aren't delivered in 2 days.
Oh, absolutely.
Or a day.
Yeah.
So the idea that the rising tide floats all boats, that has been like the analogy that's driven me crazy. Sure. Anytime anybody ever tells me that, somebody's getting screwed, and it's not the person telling me that.
Right.
But like, you think about what's occurred. People's tastes have gotten so distinct. People's attention spans have gotten so short.
Absolutely.
Experiences on the web have to amaze and dazzle. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, for our industry, the design industry, for the web, like I think it's a piece of, everyone's trying to find that thing that makes them stand out. Everyone wants to feel different. They want to create a visual language that they can brand.
Absolutely.
I think that in the web as a whole, like that's still going to be. I mean, we're in a competition for eyeballs and in a competition for attention, like true attention.
Yeah.
Not like you're scanning your phone and looking at a TV screen every once in a while. I'm talking like true unfiltered attention.
Yeah.
And like there's a drive in the web with the web now to get that attention, but that experience on a beautiful 5K Mac monitor that's 27 inches has to equally be as beautiful on
a 4-inch screen,
on a 4 or 5 inch screen. Yeah. And people don't, the forgiveness, customers, people, they have no forgiveness.
No.
If something's brutal, they move on.
Absolutely.
And I found myself being that way. Like my patience with mediocrity has slipped to almost unbearable levels when it comes to things in the web, because I'm so used to working in the industry.
Sure.
And we're looking at the best of the best of the best that every agency, every large organization in the country is working with, and it's like the excuse of things are just good enough. No. I think that's a tough spot for organizations to be in, but I think it's also the flip side of the coin is people spend real money.
Yeah.
And it is not cheap to upkeep these things. It's it's like keeping, in a lot of cases, like keeping a physical building up. So it's like trying to make sure that the customers are having this experience, but then also making sure your brand's being represented correctly, but then you're worried about load speeds. And like conversation I had this week, video is becoming such an important tool. The team at Huawei up in Montreal, like their target market is kids. Like they're not technically targeting it because they can't, because it's illegal,
right?
COPPA compliance, but their audience really is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds.
And what do those kids do? Watch videos. My niece on her tablet, YouTube.
Just YouTube all day long.
Pushing just video after video.
But the experience of the web and the importance of how motion and micro enhancements, like little small animations that trigger on scroll and things like that get your attention, that keep your attention. Like there's definitely a science and a psychology behind why things are being done.
Sure. And
there's an intuitiveness of what's working and what's not working, what's too much and what's not enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Elegant Seagulls as an organization, we're really starting to hone in our focus on these beautiful visuals combined with the appropriate motion and animation at the right time, and creating experiences that are memorable, that are immersive, but most importantly, tell a story.
Yeah.
I think that I shouldn't say I think, and I'm finding that, just as a side note, society as a whole, I think a lot. I know, like, from the experience I've seen, like, just in our vernacular, like, I don't think, I know, I'm seeing it, that the expectation's high, but people need to be told a story. And that story is visual. Has potential audio play. People aren't reading as much. People are scanning. I mean, you see the poison that's in social media space. Headline readers, even partial headline readers. Did you read an article today? Like, just small things, like put a post up on Facebook Marketplace for something. All the information is in the description. What size is this thing?
Again,
did you read the description? Because
you and I could have a whole separate conversation about just that topic alone.
So Maureen and I were talking. We had bought some new end tables, and we're trying to sell the old ones in the Facebook Marketplace. And my patience level was low on something, and it was kind of a funny situation. Maureen's like, this lady's asking me what size they are, and I have it listed in the description. I'm like, tell the lady you don't work at Shunks. Like, this ain't your business. This is a rummage sale.
Yeah.
This isn't a sales floor. Like, somebody sent a note. I mean, if the person is listening to it, if somebody's listening to this, they actually sent a note. I apologize. It's just funny because it's probably a question I'd ask too. But somebody sent her a note and was like, "Could you stain the top of this?" I'm like, I don't know. Go to Shopko and look at the furniture they got there. It's from Shopko from 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It's made of press board. Would you stain it? You could. I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but you could.
So, let's say you were having a conversation with somebody who is living in the U.B. and they want to try and start something in the digital space, and they're going to make a go of it, in your area of expertise. What sort of advice would you give that person trying to make a go of it?
Number one, it's not going to be easy. Number two, become patient quickly. Number three, don't be fearful of rejection. Keep selling. Number four, get out of here every once in a while and do some networking. Like, I think it's really important to find conferences and find areas that have a mass of people and inject yourself into it. I think, and then come back. Like, I'm not saying move there. I'm saying go to where this is happening and learn and observe and make connections and come back and do that. I think it's really important to know that just because we live here doesn't mean we can just stay here. Right. I think it's really important for us to get out, travel a bit, see what's going on, find different areas of interest, find people of similar interest. I mean, the web's a great place. You can find all kinds of people. But I think there's something important about being able to go and meet people face to face and the relationships that are built there. Like, if I meet somebody somewhere and I shake their hand, like, I'm going to remember that person versus somebody that emailed me 6 months ago and asked some one-off question. Like, I just think that and because it's rare, right? Right. Meeting people face to face in a lot of cases is rare. Being able to sit down and shake a hand or share a meal with them, like, that's such a rare occasion. I think it's every device. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. We're in a small room and there's 4 or 5 devices. It's so easy to connect with people, but at the same time, the depth of the connection is so superficial. There's no takeaway.
So really, for
you can send Gary Vee a message, and Gary Vee might be the first person to respond, and maybe it's him, or maybe it's one of his team members. You don't know. Yeah. But, like, it is what it is. Like, you can connect with practically anything. I used to joke, like, think about the kind of the set, like, could we, if we had to, is it possible to figure out a way to talk to the President of the United States? Like, we used to have this conversation, like, who would we go to find those steps to however many steps of separation there would be. But, like, it's not impossible to talk to anybody today. No. But at the same time, meaningful talk is what I think people are hungry for and trying to maintain. You know. So you gave 4 rules. You forgot rule number 5, which is never get high on your own supply. Whoa. I felt like throwing in a Notorious B.I.G. reference since you were listing off rules. That's where my... It's true. I like your style. That's where my head went. I had to throw in a 90s rap reference. If you're not throwing a 90s rap reference in every once in a while, you're doing it wrong. Like, you just are. Like, if you can't figure out a way to work a tribe reference into a conversation, And then know that there's some person on the other end of that conversation that respected the fact that you pulled out the fact that you're marauding for ears. Like, I mean, please.
So one final question for you. Ketchup or gravy on your pasty?
What? Ketchup or gravy on my pasty?
That's always my last question.
Ketchup.
Technically, it's not really going to be my last question.
Okay, ketchup.
Ketchup.
I've never had gravy on a pasty. Although gravy sounds like it'd be delicious on a pasty, gravy would be good on pretty much everything.
It is.
But I'm a old school, like, ketchup. So long story short, and this is not a knock on any current pasty creators, but you might feel the same way. But growing up, like, my grandma made the pasty. Mm-hmm. Like, there's nothing that will ever compare to my grandma's pasty. I don't know. She used the meat she used was cubed, probably flank steak or something, but it was like real deal. Was it from Becco's? No, it was from Oliva's.
Oh, I was gonna say shout out to the Olivas and the Becco's. We're on the north side of Iron Mountain.
We are on the north side kick real quick, but definitely used a cube steak. Potatoes were so good. I think my family has my mom and aunts probably had the recipe, but the deal was the pans. Okay. So these pans were real deal. Like, probably vintage 1960s. I don't know if they were ever washed. They had a patina to them, and it was almost like a cast iron like feel, but they were a regular like steel pan.
Sure.
But like you didn't put anything on those pasties. The only thing you ate with those pasties, side of homemade sweet pickles that my grandpa grew in his garden and made. Ooh. That's a pasty is properly eaten with sweet pickles.
You didn't have a slice of bread from Schinderly's?
Well, please, let's not get into Schinderly's bread discussion, because you know what? My day was going good until you reminded me of Schinderly's, because on a weekly basis, I think...
If you close your eyes, you can still smell it.
If I close my eyes, I can still taste the cornetti.
Yeah. So I'm kind of poking at John here right now with this food discussion. John is a foodie just as much as I am. We actually, the two of us, were a duo known as the Commission.
Self-named. Nobody gave it.
Self-named. Yeah. You know, after the governing body of the mafia, we're basically the governing body on food as far as the UP goes. So who knows? You may see future episodes with, if John's up to it, I guess that'll be my last question. If you're up to it, maybe we'll do some food reviews.
I'd love to do some.
Maybe we'll hit some spots and we'll have some episodes where we review some good eats around the UP.
I'd love to do that. That'd be great, because there is a surprising amount of really great food in the UP. You got to dig, and you got to not be afraid to go into an establishment that might not look like the nicest place in the world, but there's a tremendous amount of great food, and really people that care about creating food. Food has become an addiction, passion. Like, I love to cook, I love to eat, but food is, I find comfort in food. I find camaraderie around food. Absolutely. Going to dinner with groups of people or one-on-one, like, there's something really interesting about that. But there's a lot of people in the UP right now that are doing things that you can tell they care about the food. Absolutely. You know, I think you look at there's outstanding restaurants, and I've had the opportunity to eat in some really great restaurants.
And food trucks too. I mean, the culinary scene in general.
Absolutely.
Again, that could be a whole...
It's a whole other way. We could take this, how much time we got? We could take this under 2 hours. I can start breaking down something good.
Well, John, as always, it's a pleasure talking with you. It's a honor to call you a friend, and I know with 100% certainty, instead of saying I think, I'm going to say I know, like you just said.
Unless you don't know, you can say I think.
If you don't know, now you know.
That's very true.
That's two Biggie references in one podcast.
That's two. That's pretty good. But there should be a Biggie counter. You need to get some sound effects.
Air horn.
Yeah, you need a little something just add maybe just a little something here and there, a jingle or two every once in a while.
Well, I know that this is not the only time that you'll be on the podcast.
Well, I want to be back on the podcast, but here's what I want to do. So, at podcast number 100, start counting. What's this, 6?
No, this is number 4.
Number 4.
This is number 4.
Okay, so on the 100th podcast, I want to flip the script. I want to interview you.
Okay. All right.
Episode 100. Scott Redinger.
That's a lot of people to interview.
Well, you better get your list ready.
Well, I do have a list, and I've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. But okay, a deal's a deal. Okay. Episode 100, you can interview me.
Perfect. Done.
All right. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for episode 4. A few takeaways from my chat with John. The first one is the importance of technology for the economy of the UP moving forward. for so long, the bread and butter of the UP has been blue-collar jobs. And those are always going to be important in the UP, and no matter what, they're going to play a huge role in the UP. But I think that moving forward, you're going to see a lot more focus on either integrating technology into those jobs, or you're going to see other jobs completely out of the realm of blue-collar that are going to be related to technology. And I think you're going to really see some exciting things. The story of Elegant Seagulls and the story of Getz and really John's story kind of being in the middle of all of it, is they're prime examples of companies using technology for their benefit and making it work here in an area of the country that's not necessarily known for technology-based jobs. And I think that that's awesome, and I think that you're going to continue to see more of that. So that, to me, that's exciting. Another big takeaway from my chat with John is obviously timing is everything. That kept coming up over and over and over again. And it's not always easy to recognize the timing of everything, but I think that if we can keep that in the back of our mind and respect that process and be aware of the timing, not only in our careers but in our personal lives, I think that that's huge. Lastly, my last takeaway from my chat with John is he's just such a genuine guy, and he's so passionate, and he's a total ideas guy. He's something that I could bounce ideas off of, and he's going to give me honest feedback. And that's a unique trait to him. Not everybody's built that way, and I just think that I consider myself lucky to have him in my circle of friends as somebody that I can go to talk to with my ideas. And really not even just as a friend. He's really been more of a mentor to me for the last almost 10 years. So I guess I really appreciate John and who he is and what he brings to the table. So, all right. As always, a few housekeeping things. Number one, if you have not already, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Give me 5 stars. Please leave me a review. That's the way I can climb up the charts. If you don't already, please follow me on social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm pretty active on all of them. And as always, please pass this along to family and friends, anybody you think that would like listening to the podcast, because that's the way that this grows and spreads. And otherwise, that's pretty much it for episode 4 of Chat It Up. Again, I am your host, Shooter, reminding you to keep your chin up and your eyes forward.